Let's start with Saturday's Mail, and Liz Truss is standing defiant on her tax cuts, Nick.
Yep, the Mail's gone with under fire. Liz Truss vowed to push on with controversial and difficult tax-cutting plans despite market chaos. And the OBR, that's Office for Budget Responsibility to experts like me, will deliver its verdict next week. But they're going to publish the results on November 23rd, is what they're saying. So, yes, Liz Truss in a very difficult position. She can either carry on or she can U-turn, and both are sort of disastrous for her. And I've been speaking to people who understand economics from across the spectrum, and there's a lot of criticism that Kwarteng was perhaps trying to avoid scrutiny from the OBR. You know, the normal thing to do would be they would have detailed forecasts, it would be scrutinised by the OBR, they might publish the results. Now, it's a mini emergency budget, so, OK, you can't have that perfect, but at least you can do something. So they've sort of avoided scrutiny, and obviously it's been chaos, as we know, due to the pension funds, the interest rate issue. And, yeah, I can explain it. It's all incredibly complicated. And unfortunately, I can't read my own notes. They're so dense and complicated. We're spending all day...
Have you done the numbers? Have you had your calculator out?
Mark, you can ask me almost anything. I've become an economic expert in about a day.
It just says, uh-oh.
But that's...
How are your gilt yields looking at the moment?
Do you know what? I've been focusing on the gilt yields a lot. It's a big problem. It's to do with, Mark, you know, it's to do with the liability-driven investors. That's the big problem, because they, of course, the Bank of England stepped in to promise to buy their... Actually, I can tell you this, the Bank of England promised to buy their assets, and they said they're going to buy up to $5 billion a day for up to 13 days. But just the promise of that was enough to stabilise the market, and the Bank of England probably actually are going to have to do that. So you asked me about the gilt yields, and I answered, Mark.
Isn't it odd how the bank have basically committed about $60 billion? But they're doing it like $5 billion a day. That's a bit like the way when you go to the off licence with contactless, you can only buy like a couple of bottles of vodka on one purchase.
Yeah.
And then maybe go down the road to Co-op.
Yeah, it's so they don't actually have to do it, but they're just saying they'll do it is enough to stabilise. Like, I've said I'll do it, and it's like when you're sort of getting an IOU for a Christmas present. You ever had that? It's like, I promised to get you a TV, and it never happens.
I'm still waiting for my Nintendo 64. Never comes.
Or when you're at a charity event and you pledge money.
Yes,
that's always my favourite. I've pledged millions.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
But just for the record, of course, the Bank of England would honour their promise if they had to, but they won't really need to. That's the thing.
Yeah, please don't crash the markets again, Nick Dixon.
Yes, but this is... I mean, I don't know what you think, Mark, but she has to basically stick to it. But it's been so unpopular. And Truss has been going around sort of local radio stations saying, as you know, we're in a very difficult economic time, blah, 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 trying to blame the war, essentially. Whereas everyone knows, although the macro picture is difficult, it's clearly, the market overreaction was clearly as a result of this mini budget, which everyone pretty much agrees on. So she's been trying to fob it off on the wall.
But not everyone agrees, Jonathan, that it was a bad budget, because the idea is to go for growth. I'm wondering whether what the issue here with this policy is communication rather than the fine detail.
I think it could be a communicative aspect to it.
And strategic, don't you think? Because we talked about the OBR thing, right? The Office for Budget Responsibility. Kwarteng thought he could get away without bringing them in because it was an emergency budget and he wouldn't have to report to the OPR for another few months.
Normally be under more scrutiny if it wasn't emergency, right?
That's it.
There'd be more time for it to be sort of inspected and assessed, whereas now, under these kind of semi-dire circumstances, it's kind of been rushed through. OK, so it's a confidence thing. It's kind of like when I convinced my girlfriend to put all of our money into GameStop shares, and I was just trying to be really confident, and then...
Well done, you.
Yeah, I made £15 and invested £1,000, so I've just about broke even. So.
Is that sort of Grand Theft Auto and all of that?
They did sell that, yeah. It was like a big Ponzi scheme that I got carried up in.
Grand Theft Auto, one of those violent games. So are you good at sort of killing drug dealers and hookers and stuff like that?
Yeah, and also in the game as well.
I'm glad to hear it. Who knew? Life reflects art.